Hello, everyone. I'm Rhonda Blunson. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Ed Tea. Welcome to the first episode of a new series where I'm addressing the barriers of learning. Joining me today is a special guest with a wealth of knowledge and experience in public education and a holistic understanding of the challenges that teachers and students face throughout the process of learning a second language. Before we jump into this topic, I would first like to discuss the historical origins of today's topic, which is ESL, or English as a Second Language. Years ago, during the 1800s and 1900s, there were a lot of immigrants coming to the United States, which brought on a mixture of different languages and cultures. As the diversity grew, it became somewhat of a social and political concern because the immigrants were lacking English literacy and proficiency. To resolve this problem, this brought on what we call the Naturalization Act of 1906, which required immigrants to learn and be proficient in the English language to become citizens of the United States. Once this act was established, several states passed laws to prohibit the use of any other language in public spaces, classrooms, and churches. Approximately 10 years later, the American Department of the United States Bureau of Education recommended that all states unify to deliver instruction only in English in public schools. By the year 1923, nearly 35 states had adopted this policy. Now, this information came from a teacher preparation source published by Dr. Patricia Morales. Now, I want to jump into the topic of ESL in today's schools because it's a real barrier for students who struggle to learn English as a second language. Joining me is an amazing educator. She has 25 years of experience in education, and her name is Melanie Golding. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm excited to be here.
So I want to just kind of get into just kind of a few things with regards to ESL and just kind of some of the challenges that teachers and students face today. So first off, what is your position on students learning a second language after the foundational period? When we say foundational period, we're pretty much talking about after fifth grade, because we know that we started kindergarten and elementary school ends somewhere around about fifth grade.
Mm-hmm.
So if a student is not, let's just say they're not in the US, they have been learning their first language, and then suddenly, they're here in the United States and they're going into middle school. What's your position on that with students learning a second language after the foundational period?
Well, research actually says it's difficult, right? It's harder for adults, or the older you get, the harder it is to
Right.
Learn a second language.
Right.
So I think students learning a second language after elementary school, it presents a lot of challenges, not just for the students, but for the teachers.
Right. Yes.
Because if you think about it, you've spent all of your formative years learning all of these different academic concepts
Right.
in your native language.
Right.
And
Right.
then now to come into a situation where you're learning everything in English, there's so much vocabulary that you're lacking.
Right.
It's going to create a lot of gaps in
Yes.
what your understanding is conceptually about
Yes.
various topics.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it is very challenging, and I think I sympathize with teachers and students who find themselves in that situation.
Yeah, because I know as a teacher, I remember a few years ago, I taught eighth grade, and I had several students that were just entering the US and around, what was that, like, I don't know, maybe sixth or seventh grade. And I just saw like so many challenges with, just like teaching these kids and just kind of their understanding of things. Like it was really, really tough. I mean, it's tough for them, and it's also tough for the teachers. So I definitely agree with you there. Now I want to jump to kind of another question that I have. Discuss the social and psychological barriers associated with ESL. Now, what I mean by this is, how does it make students feel? How does it impact how they socialize with others?
Okay. All right. So we know psychologically, right? We humans are designed for connection.
Correct.
right? And there is a sense of security and comfort in knowing that in that feeling of knowing that you know what's going on, what's being said around you. So imagine being in a space, right, where even socially, being in a space where everyone speaks a different language from you, there's a certain level of anxiety
Yes.
that comes into play with you just not feeling comfortable in your surroundings because you don't know what's going on.
Right.
So there's that socially, but I want to say psychologically, the way that one would feel when you don't understand what's going on in an academic setting, right? Which is critical to you being successful. There's a level of stress and anxiety related to that that I think we need to kind of think about when we put students in these situations where they're a newcomer in a classroom surrounded by students
Right.
who are fluent English speakers, and there's no consideration or scaffolding being made for that student to even be able to access the information that's being taught.
Right.
I feel it's stress inducing.
Yes, definitely. Now, I know with me as a teacher, I would see students, they would just be really shy. They were very timid. Their confidence was really low because they were just like, "Oh my God, I don't want to make a mistake," or they were just very careful not to say too much. So I definitely agree once again with you there.
They don't participate.
They don't.
They don't participate. They kind of isolate themselves. You'll see that they don't participate in classroom discussions.
They don't.
They probably would not do any written
Right.
right?
Right.
Because
Right.
it's their writing
Right.
would not be up to the same caliber as an English speaker.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
there's a lot of
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot there from a social and psychological standpoint. I want to move on with this conversation. Next off, what does it take to successfully learn a second language from a holistic perspective? Because I know a lot of times when we think about learning a second language, we think about, oh, I need to learn the vocabulary, or I need to understand, how to pronounce this, or what this means or what that means. But it's not just about understanding words. I mean, there's so much more that goes into it, and there's so much more that really affects the person in the process of learning a second language. So what's your take on that?
I think so. There's a couple of different things that we have to think about when learning language. You want to think about all of the different modalities of language, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's listening, it's speaking,
Right.
it's reading,
Right.
it's writing, and then it's being able to think critically about what's being said, right? So it's
Right.
not just a matter of memorizing vocabulary terminology, right?
Right.
I think with successfully learning a second language, it's being taught how to use what you know, which is your home language,
Right.
to help you access this new language.
Right.
And there's a lot of transfer that happens in the brain when people are learning that second language. That if I don't have something to hinge what I know already
Right.
to
Right.
create that bridge to the unknown, I
Right.
think that's critical. I also believe that when we're talking about learning that second language holistically, you have to also think about culturally what situations would this new learner find themselves
Right. Right.
in terms of like teaching vocabulary as well.
Right.
So when I work with teachers, especially secondary teachers,
Mm-hmm.
when I work with secondary teachers, some of the things that we prioritize is academic terminology that will transfer across content areas,
Yes.
meaning that I need to learn words that I'm going to see pop up
Right. Right.
in all these different subject areas,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I think that that's one thing. I think we also need to think about motivation.
Oh yeah. That's a big one.
We
That's
also
a
need
big
to think
one.
about motivation
Yeah, definitely.
because there is a certain drive. Look, I taught adult ESL
Mm-hmm.
in at Palm Center Learning Center and MLK in Greece,
Mm-hmm.
right? high immigrant population, right?
Mm-hmm.
My students that excelled at learning English at a faster rate
Mm-hmm.
were my students that spoke languages other than Spanish. Why was that? Because around in Houston, in our area where we lived, there
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of translations of English, right? You
Mm-hmm.
had things in English and Spanish and English and Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
But my students that spoke Urdu and spoke Vietnamese and spoke all
Mm-hmm.
of these other languages where there weren't a lot of social accommodations
Mm-hmm.
out there
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
them, it forced them to learn the language a lot faster. There was a motivation there
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't necessarily there for my Spanish speakers. Because my Spanish speakers could turn on Univision, right?
Right.
And they could hear their home language, so there was not that drive, that motivation to kind of pick it up. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes, definitely. Oh, yeah, definitely. Now, what must an educator understand before teaching ESL students? Because I know, like, for me, prior to really working heavily with ESL students, I know that there were just things that I don't think I really fully understood because I had never been in an environment where you may have two or three different languages being spoken, and you have kids that are kind of looking at you for guidance, and they're telling you, oh, teach this strategy or teach that strategy. I feel like for me, I don't think I necessarily knew like which strategies to use or like under which circumstances to do this or to do that. So I know for me as a teacher, it was definitely challenging, when I was just kind of first introduced to it. So what's your take on that? Like, what do you think an educator really needs to understand to teach ESL students?
So there's a couple of things. The first thing I would say is that as long as you know English, then you can teach English. You don't have to know the student's home language
Mm-hmm.
in order to teach them English.
Correct. I found that out.
Yes.
I
And I
found that
think a
out.
lot
Yes.
of teachers will say, I can't work with this student because I don't speak their home language. And you don't need to speak their home language, number one.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second thing that we need to understand is that when we're teaching language,
Mm-hmm.
then we have to access all of the different domains of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say not domains, I would say modes of communication. So you want to think about how many ways can I present information to my students
Mm-hmm.
where I'm building their language, right? When we look at linguistics, right? We know linguistics, when we're studying language, we're thinking about not just teaching kids how to pronounce words,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But in order to teach them how to pronounce the words, then they have to learn phonics.
Mm-hmm.
They have to learn.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different, like,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, foundational things that you would have to be able to
Mm-hmm.
teach a student
Mm-hmm.
to learn English,
Mm-hmm.
to learn that second language. It's the alphabet system of the way the letters are presented
Mm-hmm.
graphically, orthographically,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
There's that, and there's that, but then there's also the need to create safe spaces in your classroom
Mm-hmm.
where kids feel comfortable enough to experiment
Mm-hmm.
with what they're learning.
Right. Right.
I think a lot of teachers think that they can just kind of, I'm going to show them a bunch of pictures,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to name what these things are.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're just going to be able to transfer that information. And that doesn't always hit. A
Mm-hmm.
teacher that's teaching ESL students have to understand that we communicate not just with our words, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with our actions, right? So then it's using that total physical response also
Mm-hmm.
to kind of get our words, what we're communicating across,
Mm-hmm.
using gestures, using visuals. So it's really, I would say a teacher would need to understand how do you teach a language, period, point blank,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you teach it in a safe space where people are comfortable enough to take the risk?
I like that. I really, really like that. Now, another thing that I don't think I even thought about prior to being in a classroom where it was about six or seven different languages spoken, I never thought about the first language not always being letters.
Yes.
You know, because with some languages,
There's
the alphabet, it's symbols. And I was just like, okay, I have I have let's just say your Spanish speaking student who they are familiar with the alphabet.
yes. So they have,
Okay. Yes. So they kind of somewhat they have a grasp of the A through Z, alphabet. But if you're a student that's coming from a language where it's just symbols, like nothing about A to Z, like it's totally new to you, it's everything is foreign, like you have to really start really from the bottom.
ground level, ground 0. Yes.
So that right there, I feel like that was really big for me because I just did not really think about that going into it. It wasn't until I was in the classroom and I want to say it was about 30 kids in this one class, and I had every student write their name on the page, and I said, next to your name, tell me what language you speak. So by the time I got the page back, I have 30 names, and I started grouping the languages.
Yes.
And I realized it was about, I want to say 6 to 7 different languages spoken in that one class. And then I started thinking, okay, now when I deliver instruction, or like if there's something I need to say to them, you know, I was just wondering, like, how am I going to do this?
Yes.
Because you have
on the board, it's not enough.
it's not. And what I found myself doing is, because as you stated earlier, you don't have to specifically know how to speak their language to teach them. Okay, it's actually probably preferred that you don't, because that would hint that's a huge hindrance. Yeah. I mean, they don't want you talking to the kid in their language. Okay. So what I did, okay, under those circumstances where I had to do just some small translations, what I did was I used Google, and I would type in instructions in English, and then I would have to translate it about 6 different times, because remember it was 6 different languages. So I would have to translate it, and I would have to just hope that students understood that one of these is going to be for you. I don't know what, I couldn't keep track of which one, but one of these translations you're going to understand. So I would put up on the projector, I would just put up, you know, instructions. And like I said, it would have to be 6 or 7 different sets of instructions, and just hoping that the kid caught on to the fact that, okay, she's putting this in this language, this language, and this language, and this language. And whichever one I understand, is just that's going to be then I'll understand what she's saying. But of course, you have to use a lot of gestures. You have to use a lot of pictures.
Yes.
It's a lot of like motion.
Physical.
Yes. Yes, because just with words, they're not going to really understand anything, really.
Yes. And one of my favorite teaching movies of all time, it was the Helen Keller story. If you've ever seen that movie, with where imagine that's teaching language. That's teaching language, but you're teaching language to someone who can't hear and can't see, right? And I think that's a great testimony as to how to go about teaching language to someone who doesn't have that. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. There's just so much to say about that, so much. So I want to move on. The next question, it's geared more toward the instructional piece of it. How might instructional materials hinder success in an ESL classroom? Okay. because and I'm gonna let you speak first, but I have a bit to say about this because I had an experience with this. But what's your take on that?
So this is it's interesting to me. I think there are a bunch of different materials out there designed to teach English as a
Mm-hmm.
second language learners.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best ones are the ones that take into consideration who your students are, like what their life experiences are,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
the types of situations that they will
Mm-hmm.
find themselves in.
Mm-hmm.
I know that some of the materials that I've used in the past,
Mm-hmm.
with the adults that I taught English to,
Mm-hmm.
I always used to skip around my chapters, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
there were just some things that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's like, why would they need to know that? They
Mm-hmm.
live in Texas,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think some materials hinder because they don't cover information
There you go.
that's relevant to the student and
Mm-hmm.
their experience. So the best materials that you can use actually it's kind of ingrained in what the students bring, like what
Mm-hmm.
their
Mm-hmm.
social surroundings,
Mm-hmm.
the types of things that they'll find themselves
Mm-hmm.
dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
I had more success with my students when I thought about, okay, here's my classroom full of I had in my ESL classrooms ages 17 to 70 something.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because it was an adult, it was a neighborhood center that they would come for instruction. So then I had to think about, like, the majority of my students were female. So I'm thinking, they might need to go grocery shopping.
Mm-hmm.
But I started thinking about all of these different social situations they would find themselves in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what helped me
Mm-hmm.
select my
Mm-hmm.
instructional materials. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if I went through my instructional materials cover to cover,
Mm-hmm.
then I would be wasting their
Mm-hmm.
time
Mm-hmm.
covering certain things that why would they need to know that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Right.
I think that we have to be very cautious about the materials that we use to ensure that it kind of relates to our students and their life experiences.
Right. I know for me, I realized that I have to always step outside of myself
Mm-hmm.
to really understand them because when you are selecting materials, you're selecting stories, just different things, to read or to discuss with them. You have to stop to think, okay, is this something that they would know? Is this something that they've been exposed to already? I mean, of course, nobody knows anyone's life story.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, grocery shopping, I mean, that's universal. Like women, that's something that most women do. They grocery shop, they take care of their children. So that's kind of something that they would need that knowledge. Family,
Yes.
anything about family. We all have families, so I always thought about just their life and where they come from and just things that would really be familiar to them and just stepping outside of myself, because I remember one time there was a text that we read and it was something in it that the students they didn't know what it was. And they're like, well, what is this? Like, you don't, I mean, there's no way you can discuss something if you don't even know what it is.
Right.
So I had to really, really step back and say to myself, okay, let's think about this. This is something that people are familiar with here.
Yes.
If you grew up here.
Yes.
But it's not to say that they're gonna know.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, it really kind of, it really put something into perspective for me because I just realized it's really important to step outside of yourself.
Yes. Definitely.
Yes. Okay, so we are kind of getting down to the end of our questions, but I do have one last question. And I know, this is like a magical one. This is like one of those magical questions. So, at what point in your educational journey did you truly understand the challenges of the ELL population? And at what point did you say to yourself, okay, I finally understand why it's so challenging to learn a second language. When did that happen for you?
Oh man, very early on, say I taught at a school in the East End, and the majority of our students were limited English proficient.
Hmm.
And I worked with a teacher in third grade
Hmm.
who had a set of newcomers one year.
Hmm.
And we were told that these students had to take the state mandated assessment
Hmm.
at the end of the school year, but they knew little to no English. Like they were new to the
Hmm.
country.
Hmm.
And here we were, here's the expectation that they're going to have to take this test all in English
Hmm.
because of some issue with paperwork not being filled. You know,
Hmm.
this craziness happens in
Hmm.
schools where it's like how I have a student that's still like just barely learned how to read in Spanish,
Hmm. Hmm.
barely learn how to read and write in Spanish. And now they're
Hmm.
having to read
Hmm.
all English assessment, answer all these questions in English
Hmm.
when they barely understand. They can barely carry on a
Hmm.
hi, hello conversation. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's when I kind of realized it's dire. I had students that I was working with pulling out, trying to tutor them. That first, I'm like, first I need you to just understand English so
Hmm.
that when you read, so that you can read it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I know for me, this magical moment came when I was studying for my ESL certification test. I was reading across the page, and there was, I just remember clearly that there was this one sentence that said that you express yourself in a more genuine and authentic way in your first language. Okay. That is where people can really, feel the emotion coming from you. They can, you can really be yourself.
Yes, it allows them to see you.
To really see into you.
Mhm.
Because when you're learning a second language, it's like, first of all, you don't have the capacity to express yourself in a genuine way.
Right.
You just don't.
You're grasping for what words. How do you say
Hmm.
yes?
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, like how do you say I love you, or how do you say this, or how do you say?
Mhm.
And so my thing is that really stuck with me because I just didn't think about that. I didn't think about being able to express yourself in a real and genuine way, with no limitations, just truly from your heart, just, this is me. This is all of me. And I want you to see me for who I am. You're not able to do that when you just don't have the words, or you just don't have it.
Mhm.
So that was a magical moment for me. And then also, I went to an ESL conference, and I was sitting in a room. It was just a room full of teachers.
Mhm.
And I want to say they had probably maybe about 5 or 6 presenters. And I remember this one lady who
Mhm.
had shared her story with us that she came here, I want to say maybe from Germany. I can't remember where she was from. I think it was Germany, but she was sharing that, you know, growing up, it was really hard for her because, she struggled to learn English. And she just talking about, just like her family, just her
Mhm.
experiences and everything.
Mhm.
And so she kind of wanted us to sit in the seat of
Yes.
an ESL student. So what she did was she put up on the projector, she put up a sentence, just one sentence
Mhm. Mhm.
in German.
Mhm.
And she said, I want you to tell me what this means. And she gave us a couple of minutes. She said, I'll give you some time to think about it. Just look and see if you recognize any words. Look and see if there's words that look similar to your language, to your first language. And I was just looking, and I mean, I will never forget that feeling of how lost I felt.
Yeah.
I just felt so lost.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, what is this? Like, it's not familiar to me. I don't know what she's talking about. I can't make out any of this. And in that moment, it made me think of the students that I had been teaching.
Yes.
And how they felt,
Mm-hmm.
and how how lost, and just how uncomfortable it made them feel just to not know.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, I want to say about 2 minutes later, she put up a picture. She put up a picture next to the sentence. And I think it was like a plate of pancakes, or it's something related, something breakfast. And I said, oh, she's talking about breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly I lit up, because I'm like, wow, that picture helped me a lot. It helped me make out what she's trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why these strategies that you were discussing earlier,
Mm-hmm.
like movement, the total physical response, using your body, using your gestures and pictures and things
Yeah.
like that to help people understand.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important, because when she put that up, I immediately knew. I may not have known exactly what the sentence said, but I knew what she was talking about.
Yes, she created what we call an access point.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of teachers of ESL, English ESL students, the really effective ones,
Yes.
know how to create access points.
Yes.
And we sometimes in the education world, we describe those as scaffolding, right? You're
Yes.
scaffolding the
Yes.
instruction so that you're making it more accessible. And I love that. I love that feeling of, I think far too often, not enough teachers put themselves in that seat of,
Right.
I'm here,
Right.
and I don't understand
Right.
anything that's being said or written.
Right. Right. Yes, definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much for such an amazing conversation on this topic. Please feel free to come back at any time. My door is always open to you.
Yes.
And I just kind of want to move on, just kind of, wrap things up. As we have moved, pretty much to the end of things. So I want to thank all of my fans for tuning in to the first episode in this series, and I look forward to you joining me again in the next episode, where I will discuss another enlightening topic, which is special education. If you would like to support my vision to educate the public about the concealed and controversial happenings in the world of education, please send an email to the edtepodcast@gmail.com. That's THEEDTEAPODCAST@gmail.com, and include the word support in the subject line, and a link will be sent to you within 24 to 48 hours. Please follow me on your favorite podcast network, or more specifically, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or your favorite podcast network, as I explore other debated topics in the world of education. I can't wait to meet you there to spill the tea.